Hey guys, it's snowing outside. Do you realize what this means? It means we can do stuff academic decathlon. Yes! Oh! Hey guys, so since I have nothing else to do today, I'm gonna help teach you guys statistics. It's one of the most important lessons you ever learn, so please pay attention. Howdy y'all. So here's the 5 statistical principles you will need to know to score high on the math section. Then afterwards I'm going to teach you how to do them all really quickly on the calculator. Then you'll be better than those folks who don't know how to do these techniques and shortcuts. Now, if you know all these, you'll be dandy as the king of the jungle himself. Which is to say, a dandelion. Alright, let's get started. Let's say, hypothetically, that this is the number of cookies Vishakha eats over 6 days. On the first day she eats 15, then 12, then 11, then 18, then 20. And the last day she ate 2, because after she ended the second one, she threw it out, because she thought it was a tough cookie.
I'm Vishakha.
Let's talk first about standard deviation. Standard deviation is the measure of how far something is from the mean, or how far it deviates. It is marked by a sigma symbol shown here and underlined. It's used by statisticians for a variety of things, which you will see in the next few seconds. Let's look at a graph of standard deviation shown below. Now, as you can see here, the bottom row represents the amount of standard deviations, and 0 represents the mean. So if you're 0 standard deviations away, you're on the mean. So let's say this is a population of people that take IQ tests or intelligence tests. If you're 1 standard deviation away, you're within 68% of the population, which means that's the average value. So like if you're 68%, within 68%, you're within the average. If you're within 95%, you're 2 standard deviations away, which means it also includes the above average and below average people of the population. If you're 3 standard deviations away, it means it includes the extremely above average people and the extremely below average people. So let's say Albert Einstein and Forrest Gump. If you look in the packet, it probably gives you something like this for the standard deviation formula. Whatever you do, do not use this formula. I'll show you a quick way to do them through the calculator. A way to do this problem really easily is by entering them into your calculator. So now, we have to bring out the TI-84 plus. You can start by pressing the stat button, located right here. After the stat button, a screen pops up where you can enter the information. You go to edit, then you can start entering the numbers. As you can see here, a few of them have already been entered. Now you scroll down the last one, let's enter the last number, 2, and then let's press enter. Alright, now you have all the numbers in list 1. So you click stat. Then you go to calc. Then you click 1 variable statistics. Then enter again. Now here you can see all the information that's given. X bar, or the mean, is 13. And also you can see the standard deviation, marked by the sigma x, is 5.83. And lastly, you can also see the median, which is located at 13.5. Thus, you can calculate all 3 of them at once. And you can use all 3 of them in a later problem I'll show you. Now we come to a point where we discuss variance. You may ask yourself, what is variance? Variance is basically sigma squared, or standard deviation squared. The only difference between standard deviation and variance, really, is that variance attempts to take care of outliers by squaring the deviation. Now, as you can see from our previous problem, where the standard deviation was 5.83, all we have to do to get the variance is you square both sides. So now, we have to bring out the TI-84 plus. Here, you can see the variance is basically 5.83 squared, which leaves you an amount of 33.99. Congratulations, bud. You just completed another chapter of statistics. Yeehaw! you may be asking yourself, what is a quartile? A quartile is basically the same thing as a percentile, except at the quarters. So if you have a box plot, you can see the 0, the 25, the 50% or the mean, the 75 and the 100%. So for example, if you're at the third quartile or 75%, that means you're higher than 75% of the people of the population. So if you're doing an intelligence test and you get the 75 or the third quartile, it means that you have a higher score than 75% of people that took the test. Now, how does this help us determine other things? Let's talk about the interquartile range. Going with what I talked about before, the interquartile range is basically the quarter 3 value minus the quarter 1 value. So if you look at this graph, the quarter 3 value would be the 75% and the quarter 1 value would be 25%. Doing that gives you the middle 50% of the values. This would be the interquartile range, where 50% of the population falls. So now we have to bring out the TI-84 plus. So when you go to one variable statistics and you press enter, you scroll down and you can see the first quartile 11 and the third quartile 18. So let's try and enter them and calculate the interquartile range. And now it's time for the hardest part, subtraction. So now you must subtract 18 and 11, and thus you must get a 7. You may be asking yourself, can it be that easy? Well, the answer is yes, but you must do something else with the interquartile range. The interquartile range is to identify outliers in the data. So anything below the value of quarter 1 minus 1.5 times the IQR would be considered an outlier, and anything above quarter 3 plus 1.5 times the IQR would be considered an outlier. So let's do an example with the data. Let's see what happens when we try to calculate any outliers. If you remember, quarter 1 was 11. And you subtract 1.5 times the interquartile range, which is 7. If you calculate that, you get the value. Anything below 0.5 would be considered an outlier. Also, if you do quarter 3, you get the quarter 3 value was 18 plus 1.5 times 7, and if you calculate that, anything above the value of 28.5 would be considered an outlier. So now you've understood interquartile range and outliers. Yippee! Congratulations, bud. You've just completed another chapter of statistics. Yeehaw! X, a certain number, minus the mean over the standard deviation. Now when you put these in, put parentheses around the X minus the mean because of order of operations. Vishakha one day eats 24 cookies. So if Vishakha eats 24 cookies, we want to calculate the z-score to compare that to how many cookies she usually eats. So moving over, 24 minus the mean of 13 cookies divided by a standard deviation of 5.38 gives us the z-score of 2.044. So if you look at this is a normal distribution. Now I marked the bottom with the mean, and each standard deviation is about 5, so it increases about 5. So what z-score tells us is when Vishakha eats 24 cookies, it's about 2.044 standard deviations above what she regularly eats. So it'll be around here, about 2.044. So, okay, what does this mean? This means that, if we remember we were talking about standard deviations before, this would be considered the average amount, this would be considered below average and above average from -2 to 2, and from -2 to -3 and 2 to 3. This would be considered the extremely above average and extremely below average. So 2.044 would fall around here, which tells us it is considered one of the extremely above average values of when Vishakha eats 24 cookies. And that's how you calculate z-score. Z-scores can also be negative. So for example, if Vishakha eats around 5 cookies one day, or between 8 and 3, which would be between, the z-score would have to be between -1 and -2. Congratulations, bud. You've just completed another chapter of statistics. Yeehaw! Okay, so the last chapter is probability, which I'll go over briefly because the packet does give some pretty good examples. So P, if you have the probability of P times probability of B is the probability of both of them happening. So let's say you have the probability of getting a jack, which is 1 out of 13, and the probability of getting a heart, which is 1 in 4. So the probability of a jack and a heart, or a jack of hearts, would be 1 over 13 times 1 to 4. On the other hand, if you're doing OR probability, it's the probability of the first event plus the probability of the second event minus the probability of them both happening. So in this case, a probability of jack plus the probability of getting a heart minus the jack of hearts, because they both can't happen if it's an OR probability. Okay, so the last type of probability I'll talk about is binomial distribution. It's basically a fancier way of saying the same event over multiple trials. So the packet gives you this formula. Again, same thing as standard deviation, don't use it. So I'll teach you a different way to go about it. So let's say you're given this problem. Let's say Vishakha is playing basketball. This is Vishakha. And what is the probability of Vishakha making 6 out of 10 shots if she has 0.25 chance of making a shot? You might assume that the probability would be 0.25 to the 6th power because she makes 6 shots. However, you also have to take into account the shots that she didn't make, which is, let's say, 4. So thus, you have to take the probability of that she does not make a shot to the 4th power. And afterwards, you have to multiply them both together. Then, after multiplying them both together, would give you the probability of her making 6 out of 10 shots. And this is Vishakha. Vishakha. So let's say you're asked the probability of Vishakha making at least 9 shots. So it would be the probability of 9 shots plus 10 shots, which would be 9 shots would be the 0.25 to the 9th times 0.75 to the 1st power. Then probably plus the probability of 10 equals 0.25 to 10 plus 0.75 to 0th. Now that just about wraps up binomial distribution. The same thing would happen if Vishakha makes 2 or less shots. You would add probability of 0, 1, and 2. So to review, we learned about mean, median, and mode. We learned about variance and standard deviation, and how to find them through the calculator shown below. You go stats, edit, you input the numbers, you enter, then you do stats again, then you do calc, then do one variable statistics, and then we learned about quartiles and IQR, finding the interquartile range, then using this formula to calculate outliers. Quarter 1 minus 1.5 times IQR, and anything above quarter 3 plus 1.5 times IQR. Find all your data. Okay. We learned about z-scores is you take one value, let's say 24 cookies, and you calculate how many standard deviations is from the mean. So x minus mean in parentheses divided by standard deviation. We learned about the different types of probability as well. the and, the or. And last but not least, we learned how to add things up, like adding 9 and 10 for at least 9 shots, or adding up 0, 1, and 2 for 2 or less shots.